Sir, we regret to inform you that a second Alex Palou contract dispute has hit the Verizon/NTT Data IndyCar Series. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Like, you'd think the first dispute was such a long time ago. I accidentally called the IndyCar Series the Verizon IndyCar Series for a second there. How very me. Welcome to episode 464 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison, and I'm coming to you live from the United States. Yes, I'm here on American soil. I think this is one of the first times in a while that all three of us are recording this in the US of A. I have finally embraced the culture. Yeah, I've gone all the way with it. So, shout out to all our American listeners out there. I'm one of you for the weekend. You should be very proud of me.
I'm not going to say where your undisclosed location is. All I'm going to say is you ain't one of us where you are right now.
I might put in the description after the fact, like where I recorded from. This, like, so if in case you're curious where this location was from, we'll give you a hint. It's somewhere in the state of insert state name here.
All I'm going to say is all three of us are on the Northeast Corridor for the first time. Somebody's just on the bad part of the Northeast Corridor.
How dare you imply such a... Yes, you... He's not wrong. He's not wrong at all. Oh, dear. But let's go around the horn real quick. And you've probably already noticed that Cam is not here. He's a little bit ill, bless him. So get well soon, big man. But we brought in a super sub. The super sub. The return of the king. And I get to roast him for this. New member of the 30s club.
Oh. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Mr. Ryan Erik King. Hello, sir.
Omedetou tanjabi gozaimasu.
Yes, hello. I was called for a substitution. I thought I was getting a seat at Rahal. I was mistaken.
Well, it's like, now you're here, King. You might as well just suck it up. It can't be any worse than Jack Harvey as a podcast.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, but this might be the oldest average age for a podcast we've ever had now, because we're now all in the 30s club. King is still dragging the average down and trying, bless his heart, but unfortunately me and RJ has kind of ruined that for everybody. Speaking of which, hello RJ, how's it going, sir?
Hello, great to be able to talk with you about the Pet Boys Indy Racing League on this podcast. I think we're going to have a good time talking about which chassis manufacturer is going to win between the Lara and G-Force. It should be entertaining. Honestly, Oldsmobile clearly ahead in the battle of the V8 naturally aspirated engines.
I'm sure we'll have plenty of time on this. Very quiet, where no actual IndyCar news happened on this episode.
About that.
Oh. Yeah, this is the longest set list we've ever put together for an M101 that wasn't a season review.
Well, I just did it because I wanted to put together a timeline, because if you haven't heard, there is another Alex Palou contract dispute that came up this past week.
Now, I have my hot take that it's not a new dispute. It's just the same dispute. Just, remember that time we had to red flag Texas for like 3 months? Think of that, but a contract dispute.
Yeah, but when you put it like that, you do make a valid point that this is just kind of them kicking the can down the road for the year, and we've kind of hit that crossroads we were kind of always going to hit inevitably anyway. That's one way of looking at it. But yes, we are talking about an Alex Palou contract dispute again, so much so that we have kind of forgotten the Gallagher Grand Prix ever happened, and this is our main event topic for the episode. Doesn't happen very often where it's not a race, but here we are. So we'll be talking all about the latest chapter in the Alex Palou contract dispute. Second one, first one, however you want to describe it at home. Feel free. We will also talk about the Gallagher Grand Prix as well, because... it's been a while since I've been able to say this, but it's the return of Death Taxes Dixon.
19 years in a row.
19 consecutive seasons with a win. 19.
And this was also the race where he broke the record for most consecutive starts.
319 of them in a row, beating Tony Kanaan's record, a man who was nicknamed the Iron Man.
Let it be said that number 9, Scott Dixon, has reached the unreachable star. Well, unreachable stars for many others, but not for him.
No, for Dixon, it was very much achievable, and we'll get into the detail on that one. And, of course, his main antagonist for this race. And, wait, why does my note say Graham Rahal was in second place? That can't be right. Apparently it is. Graham Rahal, with his first pole position in IndyCar in 6 years, believe it or not, en route to second place and a race that he thought was in the bag until it wasn't. All of a sudden, we'll get into all of that in the next hour and change or so, because we've got a lot to get through on this one.
Why does it say that Connor Daly is driving the 30 car now?
About that. Well, remember that. It becomes important later. Now, basically, you can find us before we get into the real action here. We are on Instagram at Motorsport 101 Pod. We're on Twitter at Motorsport_101. If you want to follow our handles personally, you can at Dre_WTF1, at RJ O'Connell, and at Ryan Erik King if you want to follow him for all the latest in pro cycling news, and occasionally writing about cars for Jalopnik too. If you want to read even more thoughts from yours truly on that, you can also head to our blogs, our blog section on our website, motorsport101.com, where I wrote an emergency piece on the morning after the news broke. I called it Alex Palou Motorsport's hottest mess. So if you want even more thoughts from me on that one, feel free. Apparently it's gone down very well. So thanks everyone that's Instagrammed me feedback saying there was apparently a good read. So much appreciated. It was very fun to write, even if there was flames coming off my fingers by the time it was over. So shout out to all you guys for that. And if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101. For the month of August, all early access episodes are just $1. So there's been no better time to support us on Patreon if you haven't already. I'm going to pull up a name here as well, because we did get a new Patreon backer in the last 24 hours or so. Shout out to Tom Mortimer, who's just become a Patreon backer. Or shout out to you, Tom. Thank you very much for backing us on there. We will give shout outs as always. So thanks to you, Tom, for backing us on there. Much appreciated. Hope you enjoyed the shows. So that'll just about do it from us. Let's get into the nitty gritty of the Alex Palou contract dispute, part 2. Oh dear. In the words of Professor M from Tuned, it's happened again. Alex Palou has created another colossal contract dispute, or the same, depending on who you ask, King, as he told McLaren team boss Zak Brown this past weekend that he refuses to join McLaren for 2024, despite allegedly signing an agreement to do so last year when he was in legal drama with his own boss, Chip Ganassi. Here are some key highlights that we definitely know, and bear with us because this is going to take a little bit of time to explain for those who are new, because as we always say, every podcast is someone's first. Palou and Ganassi settled out of court, and Palou agreed to take his extension at the end of 2022 so long as Palou could test for McLaren's F1 team on occasion. It was a pretty big open secret for most of this year that Palou was joining McLaren for next year. So much so, it was even on an episode of Bus Bros, one that's now, shall we say, been dug up again in light of recent news. Palou has told Brown since he's not joining the team, including a publicised split with his management, and Palou now looks set to stay with CGR, with Chip actively defending his driver. There's been a couple of key quotes to get into first and foremost over the weekend. First up here, Palou's now former management, Monaco Increase Management, has severed all ties with Palou, saying, quote, Monaco Increase Management is bitterly disappointed to learn about Alex Palou's decision to break an existing agreement with McLaren for 2024 and beyond. Together, we have built a relationship that we thought went beyond any contractual obligation and culminated in winning the 2021 IndyCar crown and tracing a path to F1 opportunities. Life goes on, and we wish Alex all the best for his future achievements.
They gave him a future endeavors speech.
Oh, yeah. Pure Vinnie Mac right there. Also, for the first time publicly, via a statement, Chip Ganassi has weighed in on the drama. He never does this. And he said, and I quote, "Anyone that knows me knows that I don't make a habit of commenting about contract situations. Subsequently, I have been quiet since day one of this story, but now I feel I must respond. I grew up respecting the McLaren team and their success. The new management does not get my same respect. Alex Palou has been a part of our team and under contract since the 2021 season. It is the interference of that contract for McLaren that began this process, and ironically, they are now playing the victim. Simply stated, the position of McLaren IndyCar regarding our driver is inaccurate and wrong. He remains under contract with CGR." Chip never comes out with a statement like that, and that was scathing. So, for those who are new here, RJ beautifully constructed a condensed timeline of the situation. So, RJ, since you wrote, I think it's only fair you pick up the mantle from here.
And anyone can feel free to jump in on this, but I tried to condense 13 months worth of contract drama into one timeline. It begins on July 12th, 2002, where around 3:30 p.m., Chip Ganassi Racing announces they've taken the option to extend the contract of reigning series champion Alex Palou into 2023. Some time passes. Around 7:12 p.m., Alex Palou fires off 3 tweets to his social media account that he will not stay with Ganassi in 2023. He refutes a series of boilerplate quotes given in his name and expresses his desire to leave the organization at the end of the season. Wait 5 minutes, 7:20 p.m., the press release lands in my inbox. McLaren announces that Palou will join the team in 2023. Press release confirms he'll join the testing of previous cars program at Formula One, where he is also set to join McLaren Indy driver Pato O'Ward and Andretti's Colton Herta. It does not specify where within McLaren he will race, leading to speculation that he may not be joining McLaren Indy, but going straight to the McLaren F1 team.
He got that Felix Rosenquist treatment.
Pause for context. McLaren's trying to buy Daniel Ricciardo out of his F1 contract because his second year is not going so good. They recently re-signed O'Ward to a new IndyCar deal with the promise of more F1 opportunities, and also added Alexander Rossi to the IndyCar team. Rosenquist was also just renewed recently before this, after a strong run at the Indianapolis 500, but not specifically within the IndyCar team, leading to speculation that it'll be assigned to the brand new McLaren Formula E team. This is where we're at, and we don't even get to the end of the day before a representative of Ganassi responds to a request for comment stating at around 9:15 p.m., we can confirm that Alex Palou is under contract with the team through 2023. And then 2 weeks happened, and then on July 27th, on that morning, Chip Ganassi Racing files a civil lawsuit in Marion County, Indiana, against Palou and Alpha Racing, which is Palou's racing entity, LLC, whatever. Palou is a product of the European single-seater ladder. He also spent time in Japan, and even when he was still in Super Formula, so before he gets to IndyCar, he was linked to the world of F1 because he is one of several drivers was by Monaco Increased Management, who, as early as 2019, announced tentative plans to form an F1 team with Palou and Pascal Wehrlein as its drivers. This team never materializes. We have a month of speculation, wonder God, what's going to happen next. And then on September 2nd, in an entirely unrelated sidebar, 2021 Formula 2 champion Oscar Piastri signs a new deal to become the new McLaren F1 team race driver alongside Lando Norris. Daniel Ricciardo was bought out of the final year of his deal. So if Palou has an F1 opportunity in 2023, it's not immediately going to be with McLaren.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is that this was after its own separate dispute where McLaren and Alpine were in the FIA's contract court to determine whether the language in Alpine's contract meant that Piastri had to take an Alpine seat after Fernando Alonso's shock departure from the team to join Aston Martin. It's all linked. Sebastian Vettel joining Instagram for me is the biggest domino falling meme moment you could possibly imagine.
That was the baby domino, and then now we're at the big dominoes. A little bit of time passes. We get to September 11, 2022. Alex Palou finishes season by beating everybody's ass at the Grand Prix of Laguna Seca. Chip Ganassi celebrates with his driver in victory lane as usual. It looks a little bit awkward, but It feels like if you hadn't known any of this was going on at the time, you wouldn't have noticed anything was off. Palou tells NBC Sports' Kevin Lee in Victory Lane, things are moving good, so we'll see what we can tell. But yeah, we're going to enjoy the moment now and see what happens in regards to what his plans are for next season. Palou has finished the year 5th in points for the win, 6 podiums, and despite speculation that Ganassi could take the driver that he's currently suing out of his number 10 car at any weekend, Palou starts and finishes the full season, though at Iowa Speedway on July 22nd. He confirms that he can no longer, at that time, access teams' engineering and setup data from home. A few days pass, and on September 14th, as I'm thinking, well, that settles it, maybe they've made up. It's official. Chip Ganassi Racing announces that Palou will return to the IndyCar team in 2023 after legal mediation on both sides. Concurrently, McLaren Indy confirms Felix Rosenqvist is one of its 3 drivers for 2023, Rosenqvist, O'Ward, and Rossi. McLaren also confirms that Palou will continue with his F1 TPC program into 2023 and make his F1 free practice debut later that year at the U.S. Grand Prix at Circuit of the Americas. Some time passes, we get to December 1st, and McLaren confirms Palou will be a reserve driver for the F1 team in 2023 for all events that do not conflict with his IndyCar commitments. But it is at this point that it is the worst kept secret in the IndyCar paddock, and anybody that's been paying attention that 2023 will be Palou's last season with Ganassi, with a 3-year contract with McLaren Indy already lined up to start in 2024. So that was part 1 of the Alex Palou contract saga. I hope I've not gone too fast with anything, but that's where I stood before we started this most recent IndyCar season.
Should we get into part 2?
We get into part 2. It's 2023, and Alex Palou is dominating IndyCar. Through 13 races, he has 4 wins, 8 podiums, and his worst finish on the entire year is 8th. While all this is going on, his name is starting to pop up in rumors of Senator Armstrong-like quality linking him to F1. Not with McLaren, because they're fine with Norris and Piastri, and we'll get into that, but with minnows like Williams or AlphaTauri / Bulls Racing / Faenza team, or whatever we're calling them next year. At the same time, McLaren Indy is struggling. Their 3 drivers have combined for 7 podiums but no wins in the same time frame that Palou has won 4 races. The F1 team starts miserably slow, undergoes a massive technical overhaul, then massively improves by the summer break. And as an aside, Palou has joined them in FP1 at Miami. It all seems like everything is going as we think it will until the morning of August 11th, the morning of practice for the Gallagher Grand Prix. So before qualifying, racers Marshall Pruitt writes in his latest silly season update that Palou, against all known logic, that he'll be heading to F1 or heading to McLaren's IndyCar team, is likely to stay in IndyCar with Ganassi, writing, quote, "As I understand the situation today, which could make a 180-degree turn tomorrow, he's seriously considering the third option, which is to remain in Ganassi's number 10 Honda. If that's true, it could mean his F1 opportunities have taken a hit, and remaining in IndyCar is the priority. We have practice, we have qualifying, we have final practice, and then at 6:28 p.m. Eastern Time. After final practice, Associated Press reporter / instigator Jenna Fryer writes that Alex Palou has reneged on his 3-year deal with McLaren and will not join the team after this season. Despite all of Zak Brown's efforts, McLaren CEO Zak Brown gave him a $10 million advance on his 2024 salary.
Good God. Oh, Jesus H. Christ.
This is the part where you talk about Uncle Phil at the pool table.
Yeah. Out hustling the hustler, etc.
So McLaren's gonna get that 10 mil back, right?
We'll get into that.
Sure thing, Chief.
As we're all losing our mind collectively in whatever spaces we're talking about this, be it motorsport discords or Marshall Pruitt's Twitter space, some time passes, everybody gets more details. Around 10:30 that night, Indianapolis star writer Nathan Brown confirms that Palou is no longer being represented by Monaco Increase Management as of August 9th, that Wednesday. MIM releases the above statement. that following morning at 2:35 a.m., expressing bitter disappointment to break the agreement negotiated by them with McLaren. Palou is now managed once more by former IndyCar driver Roger Yasukawa, who originally brokered his move from Japan and Super Formula to America. It also surfaces in publicized court documents that Palou has an exclusivity clause in his contract with Ganassi that does not lapse until September 1st of this year. There are also reports of a July 1st contract clause that said if Palou doesn't have an F1 opportunity already in place, he can break the deal. I don't know where that stands, but we do know the September 1st clause is good. And then August 12th, 12:35 p.m., 2 hours before the drop of the green flag, is when we get Chip Ganassi releasing his statement/pipe bomb directed towards Zak Brown. This is the one where he refutes McLaren playing the victim over the contract saga, accusing them of interference. And that is my best attempt to condense the entire Alex Palou contract saga into a brief 10-minute timeline. And this is a lot to take in.
I'm clapping like Shia LaBeouf in the meme of him in the cinema. I just put it brief in the set list notes here as a behind the scenes. I said, gentlemen, what the fuck is going on here? Where do we even start with this? Like, just obviously, just besides just settling in the pipe bomb that has been the last 5 days of this dispute that, you know, has just seemingly gone on forever. Palou has just seemingly gone back on his word again. and this weird RJ, because we've talked about this all through the year. And we've questioned why Palou would want to walk away from such an incredibly strong team. You know, a winning combination in the middle of his incredible run of dominance. He's putting together one of the greatest IndyCar seasons ever seen. We were sitting here going, well, why would you want to walk away from something like this? Even for a middle-of-the-road, lower-end F1 seat. Like, surely he must love winning to keep doing this, because McLaren have not yet proven that they are a consistent winner in IndyCar yet. And I think, at some point or another, he's probably had the same thoughts himself, because look at where we're at now.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. We talked about it. Like, I've been of the opinion that, like, McLaren Indy has the resources to be as good as Ganassi or Penske, but has yet to apply them in the same way that those two teams can. And that's really the big difference. You see it this year. Palou has been outstanding in his current surroundings. And it's not like Scott Dixon and Marcus Ericsson have been terrible by any stretch. And there's this whole other sidebar going on that, like, Marcus Ericsson may leave Ganassi. And could you imagine what Chip would be thinking if he had to replace two outstanding drivers, a recent series champion, soon to be two-time champion, and a recent Indy 500 winner in 1 year? Because as great as Scott Dixon is, no driver can race forever.
No driver can race forever. And I've made my thoughts on him very clear at the moment. He is, for me, the second coming of Dario Franchitti in that number 10. He can win anything on paper. And, you know, he's dominated this season, and this is a very strong IndyCar field. I said in my Gallagher Grand Prix review that the top 10 in IndyCar can now all win a race on pace alone. Like, Kyle Kirkwood in his first season in a car that's actually capable has won 2 races. Like, that's how good Kyle Kirkwood is. King was smiling like a proud father back there when last week in Nashville. You know, and I don't get, like, at best, to me, this feels like Alex Palou has been hopelessly naive about contracts, about commitments, about where he can go, what he can do, at best. And I'm being very generous when I say hopelessly naive. I mean, King, you look at these things a little closer than the average person does. What have you made of it all? Your initial thoughts?
If I had to sum it up with one sentence, it would be, dude's lucky he's fast.
Right. We've seen IndyCar careers end over less petty shit than this. Like, look at Oliver Askew for a prime example. Like, after he got booted out of McLaren, he was never seen again. He's now more known as a Formula E pundit than he is a race car driver these days. And, like, it doesn't... Like, if you burn a bridge in IndyCar, you could be done. Easily. We've seen it with our own eyes, how easy it can be to get the trap door released out from underneath you.
Right.
And
like Connor Daly had a messy bust up between his former employers at Ed Carpenter Racing when he was virtually guaranteed to be Ed Carpenter's new adopted son at some point or another. But then that all fell through. I can think of stuff like the ugly blackballing that Ryan Hunter-Reay experienced in 2005 that made him have to jump sides across the split because nobody in Champ Car would give him a ride because Paul Gentilozzi, who completely fired and gave him terrible equipment, basically told him never to come back. And that ended up in a lawsuit 20 years down the road. It's crazy. Alex Palou, though. Alex Palou at this stage is a whole different animal. And
well, let's put it to you this way. The only reason they're fighting is hard because they both sides know how fucking good this dude is. Like Chip has been backed into a corner because he's been their best driver for 2 of the last 3 years since he joined that team. Dixon was marginally better in 2022, and that's partly because Chip fucking froze him out towards the end of that season when the contract
froze him out of all the data. He still finished top 5 in the standings and put boots to asses in the last race of the season.
Yeah, he won that Laguna Seca race by 30 seconds in Monterey. He absolutely mollywopped the field. You don't win races by 30 seconds in IndyCar. That's virtually impossible.
No,
and yet here he is. I mean, Chip's like, let's put it to you this way. Alex Palou is the biggest responsible and accountable party for all of this. And when Chip released his statement, Palou was not criticized one iota for it.
Alex Palou has bet. We talk about people betting on themselves. Alex Palou has bet the mortgage, the house, the car, everything he owns on himself, and without even looking at the odds. And he is looking like he still wins either way. That's crazy.
But the thing was, dude didn't place a bet on himself. He hedged his bets.
Right, that's the whole thing. Like, he was like, well, you know, that he's not paying me very well. Chip's not going to give me a big money extension. Maybe Daddy Zak Brown will give me an F1 seat because I'm that good. And
I know we all have various feelings about McLaren CEO Zak Brown.
He's a hustler. He is, you know, like King will know what I'm talking about here. We have a term for people like that in football. We call it tapping up. And like it's like the biggest rule that never gets enforced in Premier League football anymore because tapping up happens all the fucking time now, and it's so vague in the book that no one ever gets done for it now. But Zak knows exactly what he's doing. He's had handshake agreements, deals done on the back of napkins with a range of parties. You know, he's done this numerous times before. I mean, he was doing this with Marcus Ericsson earlier this year. He was like, I can't believe Marcus Ericsson's not been signed up to a long-term extension. You know, we'll throw 7 figures at him to sign him for next year, openly in public. Zak knows exactly what buttons to push, and then he acts all sheepish and surprised when, again, the trapdoor falls out from underneath him and Palou out-hustles the hustler.
Yeah. That's the thing that kind of makes me not feel bad for McLaren, because during this era, they've burned so many people. Like, only in IndyCar, they've burned so many people. You don't even have to look to F1 or the other championships they're in at the moment. But from the whole, from the debacle with James Hinchcliffe when they were buying into Smith Peterson all the way up to now, it's a situation where they've done this and they've always given themselves an out should they want to get out, but now they're on the other side of the fence getting burned.
Yeah, and I've used that analogy. It's Uncle Phil at the pool table during the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when Will gets hustled out of a bunch of his money, and then Uncle Phil pretends he's shit at pool and then wins all that money back to teach the boys a lesson. It's a great episode, and it's a great analogy because that's what Zak Brown has been doing for years. Like he's very much like Todd Boehly for Chelsea right now, who owns that club from the Dodgers. It's all very, very handshake agreement, back of napkin logic. That and trying to use strong arm tactics using his brand to tie down drivers. And yeah, I don't like look to follow on from King's point. I don't think anybody comes out of this story smelling of roses, personally. Like McLaren got their pants pulled down by Palou, and to be fair, I think it's been coming that McLaren gets embarrassed in one of these stories because
it's crazy how many of how much like this like crazy like antagonizing tactics, as your colleague Scott Mitchell-Mom put it. Some of it's worked. We don't have to like the means, but the ends. I mean, Oscar Piastri's been great for them.
Absolutely. Look, do not get me wrong. Like, I still think it's funny that he had to pay Daniel Ricciardo 20 million quid not to come to work. Somebody was arguing in my mentions that, it's not dead money. No. It is dead money. You're paying someone not to come to work. I know you got to pay the dude one way or another, but now you're writing them a check in cash for the full amount straight away, and you're getting zero in return for it.
And it's not only are they paying him not to come to work, they're not paying him to stay home. He's working for someone else right now.
Right, like it's you are literally, it's dead money, and he's using his resources now for another team because he's back in F1 with AlphaTauri now. And absolutely, don't get me wrong, it was the right decision for McLaren because Oscar Piastri has been excellent in his rookie season at McLaren so far. No one's disputing that.
Yeah, when back in 2020 when we were wondering, like, gosh, they fucking cut off Hinchcliffe. They cut Ericsson. Is Pato O'Ward really ready? Pato O'Ward has been excellent. Pato O'Ward is not the problem at McLaren Indy. The reason why they've underachieved.
Yeah, but he's also whispered a lot in Pato O'Ward's ear about an F1 seat, and it's never materialized. It's not even close. Like, don't get me wrong. I remember 2022, where Jenna Fryer wrote a lengthy piece about McLaren's future in IndyCar, and Pato openly said he was on the brink of leaving that team and wanting a bigger one because of him thinking that he couldn't win a title with McLaren. Next thing you know, at Barber, he signs a 3-year extension. Now, how on earth does someone swing around on that sort of logic so fucking quickly?
Cha-ching!
Either he was paid a boatload of money, he was promised F1 priority gigs, or both. There is no ifs or buts about it, because I don't see how someone has one foot out of the door and then suddenly hoiks that foot back in the car again so fast. Like, Zak Brown is ruthless to a T, and he gives you that marketing bullshit that's what marketing people do. And I don't want to start playing that stereotype card too hard, but that's what marketers do. That's the whole point. The whole point is they're trying to rumble people. That's the whole idea. And look, Chip Ganassi's not blameless in this either. You don't make up fake quotes about a guy in a press release. That's always asking for trouble. And pay your man. Like, he won you an IndyCar title in 2021. He was 3 car lengths away that same year from doing the double and winning the Borg Warner as on top of that as well. He only lost out to Helio by a nose or two. He was this close to the first double since Dario in 2012. And he was doing it for peanuts. Like, Palou had every right to go to Chip and say, "Hey, you want to get me a bonus?"
The thing is, it's before Palou was even in the series, it was something that I've spoken about on this podcast where I think it's genuinely bad practice that it is IndyCar practice. It's an unwritten rule that they don't release salary or contract numbers.
Mm-hmm. They never have. And it's all just like under the table numbers and handshake deals and how these things all get worked out. In Formula One, the numbers leak. We get the numbers of that all the time, and it's not public via the teams, but the journos find out one way or another. They tell them the numbers, and then we all go from there.
Yeah, because in F1, there's only one dude we don't know the details of their contract.
Exactly. And IndyCar, it's all under the table. You know, we all get rumblings here and there, but we never hear the numbers, and that's annoying. And from all accounts and what I've been told, Palou was massively underpaid his first year he was at Chip Ganassi Racing when he won the title and nearly won the Indy 500 on top of that. And if Chip just gives him a boatload extension at the end of 2021, he probably avoids all this drama.
No. Hey, how many similar situations do we see, like in the NFL or the NBA, where an athlete is feels like they're massively underpaid and they're going to agitate until either they get traded to another team or they get cut?
Every running back in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and like, you know, not to lean too much into labor discussions, but you know, in all the other sports leagues, they have unions and they have mechanisms to do this. Where in the NFL, players could just simply hold out and just choose not to play if they feel like their terms aren't good enough. Major League Baseball has arbitration. Pretty much in racing, it's just like, get over it.
Yeah. If Palou had a franchise tag, he wouldn't be complaining right about now, because at least he'd be getting paid top money. That's a guarantee. That's the whole point of the franchise tag. It's not ideal for a lot of guys who want big long-term money, but the compensation is at least you're going to be paid like a top-end player in your position for at least that year, maybe two, depending on how the team operates that franchise tag. And Chip fucked around. He didn't want to pay Palou. He's in the middle of a dispute with Marcus Ericsson about this right now, and Pruitt's been reporting for weeks, if not months, that Marcus Ericsson doesn't want to be a pay driver anymore. Husky Chocolate doesn't want to keep feeding money into a seat when Marcus is now good enough to be a top contender in the series.
Dude,
now.
what an Indianapolis 500.
Yeah,
should have won two.
He's good enough to be paid for his services. Anything you have been taught about Marcus Ericsson during his 5 very bad years in Formula One does not apply to Marcus Ericsson in IndyCar.
No. He is a elite IndyCar driver. He's been top 6 in the championship for 3 years
good.
now.
I wouldn't quite say elite, but he has been very, very good. Absolutely good enough to pay.
He's been borderline elite for 3 years now.
If Ganassi were to lose 2 drivers in the same season, I mean, they only have one Marcus Armstrong to plug them with, and as much Cayman Island money as Kiffin Simpson's got, and I like Kiffin Simpson, I've talked to him, he's not ready yet.
This is the problem with Chip as a team owner. I think Chip is now living in a world of arrogance where he thinks anyone can win in his cars. I've made this point before. Marcus Armstrong is the worst thing that could have happened to Ericsson this season, because Armstrong's walked into that car as a rookie and been top 10 level quality pretty much all year long. It's probably got him sat there thinking, do I need Marcus Ericsson now?
Oh, man.
And that's the problem, which is a bit, because I've said it before, and King made this point. Ericsson, I think, is a very underrated oval guy. He won a 500. He's generally top 10 on ovals as well as road and streets. Like, Ericsson is a very good 3-tool driver. Maybe not elite in any category, but he's good enough where it's rare he's out of the top 10. And that's the problem. Marcus Armstrong has been pretty close to him on road and street tracks most of the year, and Armstrong's openly said he's prepared to go full-time next year and take on the ovals too.
So we talked about how McLaren comes off bad in this. We talked about how Ganassi comes off bad in this. What about Palou? And can I just chime in, by the way, because
sure,
a lot of people had pointed the finger toward Monaco increased management, and can I just say that they look awful on this. They look like such goodness. If they didn't have so many clients, they look like, a proper scam of motor racing.
It really comes off of Monaco increased management really comes off like they had a plan for Alex Palou that completely ignored the wishes well, from the outside, I don't know what Palou actually wants out of, all of this, but it feels like what they had in mind for Palou's career was completely different than what Alex Palou had in mind.
It is nowhere near as fucked up as the Michael Oher situation, the story, the young man that was involved in the Blind Side story, which we now know is not the heartwarming story that it was advertised as, but it's not too dissimilar.
It comes off that he makes a move to Ganassi. He signs up with them. They has that great year. It seems like both sides, both Monaco and Palou, had F1 aspirations. At some point, Palou had a change of heart. Again, this is just assumptions. And Monaco increased management set on Formula One because, again, they get a cut of whatever Palou makes, and he would make a lot more in Formula One.
And they've had ambitions of starting up their own team, even though they've never shown any sort of the resources that say an Andretti or a High Tech have. F1 bids.
Nowhere near. And I think Palou has to take some degree of burden of accountability on this as well, to a degree. But his management has made him look like a complete clown over the last year, and I need to point out, I spoke to my colleague who covers IndyCar, Jack Benyon, over at the race about this, and I wanted to deep dive and ask him straight up, dude, how is Alex Palou as a person to interview? And he was glowing in talking about Alex Palou. He said, one of the nicest dudes you'll ever interview. He takes the time to properly process answers, even though English is his second language. It's easy to forget because he speaks perfectly. He gives you the time of day. He asks how you're doing. He genuinely gives a shit about people. I have never heard a bad word said about Alex Palou as a person outside of contract disputes. He is one of the most universally liked people in IndyCar's paddock. In a paddock which is generally full of good people. It's not very many people we criticize for character issues in the IndyCar paddock. Rarely. It doesn't happen often. Palou was spoken about glowingly. And I mentioned it in my piece as well, because obviously Zoe, our beloved chat member, former guest, etc., has also met him and said the same thing, essentially. So
I can back this up. I remember in a sit-in during his FP1 debut at COTA, it was so nice, so pleasant to talk with. He's everything that you would want. If you were the parent of a young aspiring racing driver, you would want your child to be like Alex Palou in the way that you carry yourself off the racetrack.
I don't want to sound like a devil's advocate here.
Mm-hmm.
But
feel free.
Nah, he's a great dude. He's a great
dude. You had us going for a second there.
But you just wonder, God, how on earth did he get himself into this mess? Because he got himself into this mess.
Because I was going to say, where does this is what we're never going to know for sure. Where does Palou's personal accountability stop, and where does MIM start? And again, we'll probably never know where that scale is. But it's made him look like a goon in the eyes of many people, and understandably so, because he's going to end up pissing off two parties against the middle.
Being blunt about it, any agent, they represent their athlete or whoever they're representing, and they serve at the athlete's pleasure. Palou signed up for this.
Yeah. Again, it's like I said earlier. Is it hopeless naivety at best, or is it something more sinister? I don't know, because in whatever it is, it's backfired and it's blown up in his face again, and it's let himself get roasted all over the internet and criticized by journalists, and quite rightly so, because, and don't get me wrong, as funny as it is to see Zak Brown get his pants pulled down, Palou is the reason he's in this mess. No. Ultimately, he signed the dotted line. He was told by his management firm what to do, and again, that relationship with his agency is a two-way street at the end of the day. And why have they now cut all ties as well? As this past Wednesday, allegedly, according to MIM, Palou wasn't answering his calls So, like, again, it's all just such a mess. And, like, it's going to sour a lot of people's perspective on Palou, who deserves, who, again, is otherwise universally liked. Yep. It's made him look silly. And, look, for me, I think he's ultimately making the correct move. If he's saying he's not going to drive for McLaren, they will end up settling that dispute one way or another, probably financially outside of
through gritted teeth. Because as we talked about in the first part of this, like Zak Brown and Chip Ganassi do not like each other, and that was known before Chip released that pipe bomb on Saturday morning.
Right,
and I'd say Palou better be satisfied with Ganassi. Because, yes, I know time heals all wounds, but the other team owners are not going to forget this. And it seems like he's going to be spending a lot of time at Chip Ganassi Racing, whether he wants to or not.
He's very lucky it's the best team in IndyCar right now, because if it was...
I was about to say, like...
If it was anything less than that, I think he'd be a lot less happy about the situation, but he's very lucky.
Oh, no, Alex Palou has to stay at the best team in IndyCar for the long term. What a shame.
What a shame. Oh, what a problem to have.
I mean, knock wood that they don't completely lose their way from an engineering perspective and they start circling the drain.
Which is unlikely given how well that team is run. They have 3 title contenders year on, year out, and Marcus Armstrong's walked into that team and been a very solid rookie right off the bat. They'll be fine, is the general impression that I get. And I ultimately think, I agree with King, I think Palou is ultimately making the right call by staying with Chip. It's a winning team, it's a winning package, and it's it's the best team in IndyCar right now, and it's looking very much like Palou's going to win 2 titles there in 3 years. And he's had golden chances to win the 500 every year since he's joined them as well. Like, he could have had 2 or 3 in an alternate timeline by now already. So I don't think Palou's got too much to worry about there. I know his number 10 crew loves him and have batted for him immensely despite all of this.
Yeah.
But my God, Alex, know what you're getting into. For God's sake, people actually like you. Like, Jesus. Like, you know how hard that is in motorsport sometimes? Yeah. A sport that's full of dicks? God, he's done well. Anyway, speaking of the Alex Palou team, Chip Ganassi, did you hear that another one of their cars won this Gallagher Grand Prix this past weekend? Apparently that was news too. In the actual Gallagher Grand Prix itself, Scott Dixon would roll back the years with a classic fuel-save strategic 2-stopper comeback to win from a spin and starting from 15th on the grid. He pulled the pants down of Graham Rahal, who led 36 laps early on and looked set to lead an RLL 1-2 finish until the final stages of the race. Scott Dixon still has it, right?
Well, I mean... Besides what happened it's a shame what happened heading into the weekend happened, because this probably, I wouldn't, hopefully not the last big weekend of Scott Dixon's career, but this is one of those moments that is gonna be on highlight reels for IndyCar for the rest of the time. That in his, record-breaking consecutive start, he extends his streak of wins in in consecutive seasons.
A winning season, yeah. Like, it's his 19th consecutive season with a win, his 21st overall. The one that leapt off the page to me, besides, again, as King mentioned, his 319th consecutive start, beating Tony Kanaan's all-time record. Again, a man that was nicknamed the Iron Man of IndyCar for that very reason. It was also his 200th top 5 finish, if you include his kart and champ car days. He's had 382 starts. He's finished in the top 5 in 200 of them. That's a 52% rate. That is unheard of. That's unfathomable.
I knew this race was going to be crazy, right? Because Scott Dixon said he had a monster of a start, but nobody was paying attention to that because, oh my God, what is Devlin DeFrancesco doing around the outside of turn 1?
And even King begrudgingly has to admit that might be the best highlight IndyCar's had all year. Devlin DeFrancesco passing 4 dudes around the outside of turn 1 and leading the race from 5th on the... It was already wild. He qualified 5th, made the fast 6 for the first time in his career, and then goes from 5th place to the lead before that early lap 1 caution where all hell broke loose at turn 7. A 4 wide into turn 7, which is never a good idea. It's never a good sign when, like, Devlin DeFrancesco's PR is in my mentions hollering for the man to get a job next year. True story. There are strong rumours that say he's going to Dale Coyne next year, with David Malukas going the other way and essentially a swap deal. So get your money, Devlin. Fair enough.
Get your money. No, that's not how this works.
Give your money.
Give your money to another team, Devlin, as you do. So good for him in that one. But I mean, that was a messy turn 7, isn't it, on the opening lap? I think it's Grosjean accidentally checked up and spun Dixon out.
Yeah, this was right at the split second where Palou and Armstrong are kind of coming together. They make contact. Palou drives away fine. Armstrong spins out. Grosjean, after spinning Dixon, stacks up into Armstrong, and then, that's the Astor Cup decided. Joseph Newgarden has mounted the top of Marcus Armstrong's car.
Yeah, and Newgarden was already having a horrible weekend. He had already qualified 19th and then had to take a 6th place grid penalty because his engine didn't complete a full cycle. So he was starting at the back anyway, and then he gets collected lap 1, loses 2 laps trying to, free his car via the nose cone. Dead weekend. Palou's lead is back up to 101 points. It's effectively over. A couple, if he finishes...
It's 101 points over Scott Dixon now, because with this win, Dixon left Newgarden in the standings.
Yeah, Scott Dixon, very quietly, second in the championship again.
Oh, man.
just because it's Scott Dixon. That's why. So if he finishes... if he finishes in front of Dixon and Newgarden at Gateway, which, let's be honest, probably isn't happening because Joseph Newgarden is a freak at short ovals in Penske. But in case by some miracle he does, Palou leaves Gateway as champion 2 rounds early, which would be just fucking ridiculous.
We have never had a championship clinched early since the unification of 2008. The last person that did it on either side of the split was a certain Frenchman who was regarded as the worst driver to ever win 4 consecutive Champ Car titles.
It's not Seb Bourdais.
How many have won 4 in a row, though?
About that. It's a bit like how Barry Bonds is the worst player to ever hit 762 Major League home runs.
Yeah, it counts, but it doesn't, depending on who you ask. I mean, yeah, I love that Zoe says, okay, Paul Tracy. But yeah, it's like Palou was scruffy all weekend long. He got into 2 multi-car tangles, got away with it, and finished in 7th. It was his 2nd worst finish of the year. I can't stand this man. He's ridiculous. Make it stop. But you know what's funny? We were watching this race on our Discord server. I think all 3 of us were in there as it was happening. It was about 1 or 2 laps before the commentators had clocked that the leaders were coming in for their 3rd and final round of stops. Dixon was still going. He now cycled to the front of the field.
That's what Scott Dixon does, man. He sweats fuel. The only thing I was worried about at the end was, would the tires last on that final stint? And he admitted, when he was trying to push to get the car up to speed on his outlaps, he burned off a lot of his tires. He had a bobble late in the end that almost gave Graham Rahal the chance to pass him back.
Yeah, it's like we've just realized the leaders are coming in for their final round of stops. Dixon's still going, and about that point, we all just sat around and realized, oh fuck, Dixon's in the net lead here. Holy shit! Sequence, baby. He's back on sequence. Oh no! and then look, we'll talk. We'll transition into this a little bit now because we've got to talk a little bit about Graham Rahal here. And a part of me genuinely feels bad for Graham because he was the dominant car all weekend. had a brilliant pole position, and do not get us twisted. Christian Lundgaard is a stud. We love him on this show.
This could have been a Rahal Letterman Lanigan 1-2 finish.
And Lundgaard got
boned on his second to last pit stop.
Lundgaard got boned again. Like, Lundgaard must be thinking, what have I got to do to win at Indianapolis? Like this time last year, he was the rightful deserving winner of that race because Rossi's car was illegal, and I can't stand how North America doesn't throw people out for technical DQs. Debate with your mum about that one. Like, Lundgaard for me was the rightful winner of that race. Like, he was beaten by Palou on a god tier strategy the first race we had here this year in May. And now, this time round, he was gunning down Rahal before that final stop. He was within a second of him, and then gets screwed on an 11-second pit stop.
The fuel nozzle failed.
Oh, dear.
Lundgaard must be thinking, what have I got to do to win at Indianapolis? Like, honestly. But Graham had the dominant car all weekend. His first pole since Detroit 2017, when he qualified on pole by less than a tenth ahead of his own teammate, led 36 laps, was comfortably the fastest man on the free stopper all day. Besides, like, Lundgaard was the only man really who could challenge him in his teammate's own car. And then when we all worked out Dixon was back on sequence, he chewed into Dixon's 7-second gap like it wasn't even there. It was just that final second. I said it on the call. I was like, it's going to be that final second. Can he get over the dirty air of Dixon and find a way around? And he came so close. 2 laps to go, he was 0.2 away, and Dixon had enough fuel saved where he could still use the button on top of his low fuel and was able to hold him off. And that's what got Dixon the win, well, right at the end of the race. But the original question I had here was that is RLL back on the up? But we've now had to kind of divert that a little bit because it was breaking news. It's come out today as we've recorded this. Jack Harvey will not take part in the rest of this season. He is gone. He's been let go of immediate effect in the number 30 car, and it will be our favourite super sub, Connor Daly, filling in at least for this weekend, or next weekend at Gateway, in that car, because Connor Daly, he's determined to complete the bingo card of teams he's driven for in IndyCar. Now he can tick RLL off the list.
This is his 9th different team that he's driven for.
9th!
I've got a question to ask about the Harvey transaction, but I first want to go to Rahal. Like, yeah, this was solid. This reminds me of what Graham Rahal was 2015 to 2017. I cannot believe that in the moment when he finally got back around Devlin DeFrancesco, that none of us on IndyCar Twitter or the M101 circles did not bust out the classic line from that Sunoco commercial, Graham Rahal grabs the lead.
I feel like we all missed a step on that one, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
He's been so good. He's been so good after Indianapolis 500. I know they were milking that footage of him getting bumped from the field at the 500.
I'll give him this. I've said it on this show before. He took that with exceptionally good grace. And, even Dre Heart of Stone Harrison was like, God, he looks like a beaten man. He looks like a crushed man emotionally when he had to rely on his kids and his wife Courtney to pick him up after that one. And look, Graham Rahal is not an easy man to like at times. Yeah. I've said it before. He can make... I think he means well, but I think he makes very clumsy statements when a mic is shoved in his face.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
And it doesn't make him the most endearing when he's made very sus comments about people like Romain Grosjean, like whenever things don't go his way in IndyCar, he always seems to be very quick to blame someone else. And
he's his sport's biggest cheerleader, but sometimes he does more harm than good in that. I think that's fair to say.
And I understand, because IndyCar's got a lot of culture where, I've joked about hashtag please like my dumb sport on many occasions, and Graham is the perpetual cheerleader of that and the mascot of the phrase. But I think the big move was that he fired his crew chief after Detroit. And I think since then, he's come off a lot more humble. He even talked about that firing during his post-race interview where he said, look, I don't dislike any of the people we let go and we've moved on from. It was just, we felt like we had to make a change, which is something that's, I've never seen Graham take that a degree of accountability and for what he's done behind the wheel. And, I'd like to think that bumping has humbled him a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't blame him for feeling that way because look, say what you will about Graham, he's a quality fucking driver, and he has been for a long time. And I mentioned it before, 2017, he was arguably the best Honda in this series. Like a couple of years prior, Graham Rahal was a genuine title contender, an elite level driver in this series. A guy that we had joked went years without winning into suddenly being a guy that could take his own team name to a title. He very nearly won the 500 a couple of years ago as well. He was on the winning strategy when this tire fell off after the pit stop. I'm like, Graham is still very good when he wants to be, and I'm glad he's had a couple of weekends because I think he was very good at Mid-Ohio as well, but he was let down by 2 slow pit stops. Graham is finding something again, and that's kind of cool to see. Like, he's one of the guys that the series is probably in a better spot if a Rahal does well.
Yeah, I think the series is generally in a better spot when any of their second-generation talents are doing well. But Rahal especially, but we forget he's still only 34 years old. He debuted days after his 18th birthday on the streets of Las Vegas in 2007.
I was going to say, this is year 15 for Graham in this series. 15! And he's only 34! Like, it's you forget he's been around donkey's years. He's now old enough to where you might race with a second-generation guy year to year, like LeBron with Bronny, potentially. He's getting to that point already. Thank God his kids are a lot younger. Because that would be a terrifying thought. But, on one end to the other as well, we've got to talk a little bit about Jack Harvey.
I don't understand how a move that we all thought when it was announced... 2 moves announced that we thought Jack Harvey had done all that he could at Meyer-Shank Racing and was ready to move on to a more established team. Consequently, Meyer-Shank Racing had just won the Indy 500 with Helio Castroneves, is coming back full-time. They feel like they could take on a more established driver like Simon Pagenaud. And before the injury at Mid-Ohio, none of this has worked.
It's alarming that everybody got worse off the back. And you said it, RJ, and I think you're absolutely right. Everybody got worse off the back of that deal. How? I thought this was a great move for all parties. Jack Harvey was a stud at MSR. I think he was a guy that was challenging for wins on occasion for Meyer-Shank.
Wins, podiums. I mean, it was going to come.
Yeah, he was knocking on the door numerous times at MSR when he was there, and I thought, this guy is good enough for at least an upper midfield seat. He got that seat with RLL, who was still, in the top 6 or 7 championship-wise. They had a car that could penetrate that top end on a good day. Takuma did it, Graham did it. Was still more capable. Okay, that's a great landing spot for him.
And then they're trying out this 45 car, and it's fast almost every weekend that it enters. It looks like they are ready to go to 3 cars.
Yeah, at the time I was like, yeah, this makes sense. You got a studding Christian Lundgaard on top of that as well, a guy that could have easily been an F1 in an alternative timeline. And then you bring in Simon Pagenaud, a former champion, a former 500 winner for Major. That's a huge coup for a team of their size.
500 death lineup.
Yeah, and it's all gone to shit. All of it. Like, Christian Lundgaard's the only bright spot out of all of this, and he had nothing to do with the deal in the first place. They needed someone to fill that 3rd car, and they got Lundgaard, and he's been brilliant for him, but God. What happened, Jack? What happened?
Loved it, Jack. We'd love to have you on board to talk about what the next plans are. I hope this is not the end for him because, he's good enough to stick around.
He's proven it. He's more than good enough to be here, but he needs to be in the right car. And RLL's was clearly not that post-expansion. Zoe makes the point in our chat. She feels that both teams expanded too quickly. Do you think there's something to that?
I feel like it's easy to look back at that with hindsight in the Rahal Linderman Lanigan case because, again, in 2021, Rahal and Sato were very, very good. Sato maybe not at his best, but Rahal was still consistently good, and the 45 car was quick, either in qualifying or the race or both. It genuinely looked at the time like they were ready to take on 3 full-time cars, and Meyershank Racing just won the Indianapolis 500 and surely has the resources to run 2 effective full-time cars. And oh, by the way, Meyershank Racing has also been in the news because it's now official. Elio Castroneves is stepping away from full-time driving to be the part-time driver and partial owner of the team. Tom Blomqvist is going to take his spot. And if you were worried about how Daytona Deflategate was going to impact their Honda situation, at least in IndyCar, they're staying with Honda engines.
And look, on a personal level, I'm gutted for Jack. I mentioned it on Twitter earlier today, and I'll say it again here. He was one of the few IndyCar guys that gave us the time of day when we were starting to cover this series, and King interviewed him. Again, he's one of us. He's a proper nerd. We love him on this show, and I think I speak for everybody else. I mean, we wish Jack all the best. He's a great guy, and a proper racer. And I really hope it's not the end for him. And if it is, I hope he lands on his feet in someplace else, because he's a very talented driver in the right setup, and he proved that when he was with Meyershank, as far as I'm concerned. But looking to the future, it's hard not to get excited about Tom Blomqvist in an IndyCar. Like, that is a stud. And he's a very, very talented sports car driver. We know that. I'm glad he's getting the single-seater rub that he's long deserved for a while.
That in 2014, there was one person that finished between Esteban Ocon and Max Verstappen in the European F3 standings. That was Tom Blomqvist. Another second-generation driver, the son of a World Rally champion.
Yeah, we forget about that, and we don't talk about his time at the Neo team in Formula E either. Yeah, I'm going to speak of that one.
Yeah, it's an endorsement of, like, even after Deflategate at Daytona, people are still like, oh yeah, Blomqvist still the real deal.
Oh god, yeah. Look, I watched that race, and you know me, I'm not the biggest sports guy. I was like, Tom Blomqvist is a monster. What is this dude?
That ain't all trick tire pressures, my man.
No. Like, the man is a damn good racing driver.
It sure helped, but it wasn't all that.
And look, I hope it's not, I hope it's not them pushing Simon Pagenaud out of the door for whatever reason, whether it be medical or something else. If it is him and Linus Lundqvist next year, that's a very, very solid team, because Linus is every bit as good as advertised. Like, top 12 finish again in Indianapolis. Apparently the team were delighted with that, and they should be, because it's the brightest spot they've had all year. And
it's been awful.
It's been an awful year, but there is definitely a bright future on their horizon. And look, as we said it last week, we'll say it again. Linus Lundqvist's talent was never the problem. Man is a stud. And then again, hope he gets a seat somewhere.
Absolutely.
Hopefully it's not Simon Pagenaud's expense, but we'll have to wait and see. Whew, deep breath.
That was a lot. Can I also just say before we go, like, Scott Dixon racking up 319 starts, considering the era which he raced in the mid-2000s, is nothing less of a remarkable achievement. The only thing that kept him from starting every race that he has entered and taking this streak to over 380 was the fact that in Milwaukee in 2004, he banged up his ankle and his knee and was told not to start that race. He has started every race since for 20 years almost.
Yep.
In an era where serious injuries and competitor fatalities were alarmingly high in that era of the IndyCar series. It's a little bit of luck. And it's a little bit of skill. Scott Dixon is the man.
To close out, I will happily say this. You cannot have a conversation about who the greatest of all time in motorsport is without mentioning Scott Dixon's name in the conversation, which is already a ringing endorsement of how fucking good he is. It's like, again, 200 top 5 finishes in IndyCar and Champ Car combined is outrageous. Like, his average finish in his career in IndyCar in a spec series over 21 years is 7. What?
You don't have to like it. You don't have to think that it's exciting. You may think that it's boring and uneventful, but man's doing the job.
He's the GOAT. He is IndyCar's GOAT. I don't care what you tell me. That man is a legend. And shout out to the story I saw on Marshall Pruitt's YouTube channel when he brought Dixon a bunch of craft beers to celebrate, and he had a condom in the basket. Marshall Pruitt is that motherfucker. And I love that Dixon's response was, haven't had to use one of those in a while. Oh my lord. What a guy. What a guy. We'll be back next week for MotoGP's Austrian Grand Prix weekend. Apparently there could be some KTM silly season news about to drop that weekend as well. Where will Pedro Acosta end up? Any guesses? Send him in at home. But yeah, MotoGP's Austrian Grand Prix this weekend. We'll have a full review of that. And we'll do a little F1 mid-season review as well. We're weighing up how the F1 season's played out so far, going into part 2, starting up next weekend when F1 returns to... Oh, goody, it's Zandvoort. Will Verstappen make history with his 9th consecutive win, tying the great Sebastian Vettel's all-time record? We'll have to wait and see. Until then, you basically can find us one more time, motorsport101.com for our website, and some bonus thoughts from me on Alex Palou on there as well. At Dre_WTF1, at RJ O'Connell, at Ryan Erik King over at Jalopnik if you want to read more from him on cars, motorsport, and occasionally yachts. And boats. King, keep pushing for more boat posts. Do what needs to be done. The world needs to see more of Ben Ainsley taking L's, quite frankly. More of that. Thanks for joining us, big man. Pleasure as always. Until next time, I've been Dre Harrison, they've been RJ O'Connell and Ryan Erik King. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. Sayonara.
Adios, y'all.
Bye.